Today will be our first video in a series completely focused around getting our shops organized. This video will be the intro to this series, focusing on how I figure out what to put where by prioritizing space and frequency of use. Because space is so limited in a small shop, it's extremely important that we utilize every square inch that we can. So I'm gonna go through how I organize my shop. This is by no means the only way to do it or the best way to do it, but it's what's worked for me over the last few years. We will be referencing this process over the next few videos as well, so hopefully it makes sense to everyone.
We are going to use two steps to determine where items are going to be stored. Step one will be to determine what space is the most valuable and which ones are actually options for each tool. So let's go over how I value space in the shop and why. These first two areas we will only use to store things if it's the only possibility. We will try to do anything we can to utilize other space first before using these. First off is floor space. This is your most prime real estate because not only do large tools, workbenches, and in my case, vehicles use it, but you yourself also use it. You need floor space to stand, move around, and work on larger projects that won't fit on your workbench. The tough thing with this space is once you have something that uses this space, it's very hard to get that space back, as it's likely the only option. The second is benchtop space. This is also very valuable as these are primarily used for assembly tables or outfeed tables, and if I store anything on them, it's going to be in the way most of the time. I do my best to make sure that nothing has a primary home on top of any workbench in my shop. I made my bench a certain dimension for a reason. If I have things stored on them, it instantly reduces the functional space. The next three areas are our sweet spot. We want to get as many things stored in these locations as possible. Third is wall space. Wall space is normally one of the most underutilized spaces in this shop. Even if someone has a few cabinets or a sheet of pegboard mounted to it, there's normally still a lot of opportunity here. What's the best way to get a tool to not consume floor or benchtop space? Stick it to the wall. Fourth is cabinet and drawer space. This space is great because it can hold a ton of items, can keep them organized, can keep them dust-free, and can hold things that are odd-shaped or that can't be mounted to a wall easily. However, it does add an extra step of opening the drawer or cabinet door, and may increase the chance of clutter inside since it's out of sight, out of mind. This also may take longer to find something if you don't remember which drawer or cabinet the item you need is actually in since you can't see it. Fifth is ceiling and airspace, or things suspended from the ceiling. If you could have something mounted to the ceiling and suspend it down to use when needed, like an air filter, in-ceiling speakers, a power reel, air hose reel, or in my case, a camera mount, all of these are freeing up wall and floor space by taking advantage of otherwise unutilized space and create a safer work environment as you're not stepping around them or over them as a tripping hazard. And finally, these last two are very underutilized areas but should only be used for items you rarely use as they are inconvenient to get to. Sixth is unreachable wall space, things that require a ladder. This is strictly there for items you rarely ever use. Maybe things you use once or twice a year, or for items you think you may use and just haven't found a project for yet. Space up there isn't very valuable, so it's a good place to stash this for now. And finally, 7 is space not in your shop. This could be a storage room in your house that you have more space in, it could be your attic, it could even be outside. Most people don't think about this as a storage option, but if you're not using it very often, or need to get to it too frequently, it's a good option for you. For example, I didn't have room for a large air compressor in the shop, so I stuck it in the basement and then pumped the air line up into the garage to save space. One big thing to consider when thinking about how much space you have to work with is to think about all surface areas in your shop, not just your floor. If you have a 20 by 20 shop, it's common to think you have 400 square feet to work with. But in reality, you have a lot more than that, normally around 4 times more. It's true you have 400 square feet of floor space, but a normal garage has 10-foot ceilings, so you actually have 800 square feet of wall space as well, and if you have 400 square feet of floor space, you probably also have 400 square foot of ceiling space. So in total, you actually have 1,600 square feet of total surface area available to use for storage.
Now I know a cabinet is technically wall space, and a drawer is going to be encased in something that's either taking up wall space or floor space, but I wanted to separate them because of the differences in convenience of use.
Step 2 is going to be to determine how often you actually use the tool. We want to know this because wherever you plan to use that tool the most, in most cases around your assembly table, we want to get these tools as close to that as possible and the ones we use the least further away. There are a few exceptions to this. First off, clamps should always be as close as possible to where you assemble your projects. I'll explain that logic a little more later on. Second, tools that require power to charge batteries should obviously be by an outlet. And 3, stationary tools that require dust collection need to have access to a drop.
Anyways, let's walk through a few scenarios real quick to figure this out. The biggest question isn't to ask, can it go here? It's, does it make sense to go here?
First off, a simple one. A full-size table saw. Spoiler alert, it can only go on the floor. That's it. Tools that can only go in one place are why you need to prioritize them first and then figure out if you can put other tools elsewhere. Next, let's do a cordless drill. It's not going to go on the floor. It could go on a bench top. It could be stored on a wall. It could go in a cabinet or a drawer. I'm not going to hang it from the ceiling. I use it too often to keep it up high. And I'm not going to put it outside the shop. If there is remaining wall or drawer space, instantly cross bench top off the list to free that up. So now we're left with, do we put it on the wall or do we put it in a drawer or cabinet? This is where I would ask, how often do you actually use the tool? If it's used frequently and you have the space, then put it on the wall as it's faster to get to. Opening a drawer or cabinet door is one more step to get to a tool. They have their place, but if it is something that you do enough throughout your day, it wastes time, especially if you have to open multiple drawers or cabinets to find it. Secondly, you need a place to charge the batteries anyway. You likely aren't going to do that inside a cabinet or inside a drawer. And I prefer to keep the batteries and chargers with the tools you use them with.
When organizing my shop, I made quite a few mistakes along the way. And even making this video, I found myself thinking of new ways to improve things. Here are 10 things I did wrong in the past around organization. First was having the mindset of, it's always just been there versus why is it there? Throughout the years, what I've done, how often I've done it, and what tools I have changed a lot, and I didn't adapt quickly enough. Second, I didn't implement French cleats early enough. This would have helped the first one out a lot, as it's a lot easier to move things that are just hanging there versus actually mounted to the wall directly. In the case of it being mounted, even though it's not super hard to unmount something, re-find a stud and mount it again, it's just the mental aspect of it that it's more permanent than on a French cleat where it's just hanging there. It's more of a temporary space and it doesn't take a lot to move it around. Third was I didn't plan for growth. So often when I'm making and designing a project, I would use what I actually had on hand at the time versus what I might have in the future. So too often I would finish a project, get it done, and be organized, and then I would either upgrade or add more options, and now I had no place to put it, so it went into a second space. There were actually times where I had things in 3 different places now instead of just one because I didn't plan for it. Fourth is built what I saw online versus what I actually needed. Whether it was the style of fixture, the capacity, or even the location, sometimes I just saw it as an upgrade over what I currently had, which was a plus, but I didn't take the time to actually slow down and think about what's actually best for me long term. Fifth is making storage that's easy to make versus easy to use. Sometimes when you have a few spare hours in the shop, it's easy to want to try and accomplish something quickly and just save some time and get it done. I've done this multiple times on shop projects and I've regretted it almost every time. And instead of just saving a few minutes, I would have waited until the next day to finish it properly. Sixth is holding on to things for way too long. For the longest time, it pained me to get rid of duplicate tools that I had. It may have been that I bought a single bit, for instance, to use that day, and then a couple months later, I liked it so much, I bought an entire set that also came with that exact bit I already had. In the past, I would hold on to that one forever. I'd put it up top in a toolbox that I never went back and ever used. Now I would see if my neighbor would need one, see if it's a possibility of us trading tools, something along those lines versus just hoarding it forever. Wood scraps I would save forever. Pieces I would probably never use, but just in case I would someday, to the point where my bin was overflowing. At some point, you have to move on, as painful as it is, especially in a small shop. Seventh was I didn't locate items close to where I would actually use them. I would just keep them with like items. So often I'd leave them tucked away in the cubby, and then when I would be done using them, instead of taking them over and putting them away, I would just push them off to the side of the bench. They would end up on the ground. They would end up propped up against a wall somewhere versus where they're supposed to go. 8 is I used to keep a lot of things down that I didn't use very often. I used to instead just keep them down low in case I ever needed to use them, which limited my space for tools I actually use a lot versus the ones that I don't. 9th is finishing a project before starting a new one. I still struggle with this. Too often I'll be in the middle of a project, finish up for the night, go online, start researching other things, and start ordering parts for future projects. And unfortunately, then I have to find a home for those while I finish the previous project, which just adds more clutter to the shop. And 10 was putting off getting organized versus working on a project. Getting organized isn't fun. It's not something you can brag about. You can't send it to your friends or post it online and people get excited about it. It also isn't something that really improves the inside of your home or that you can sell. But since I've made it a priority, I'm much more efficient in the shop, and I wish I would have done it much earlier. So that's going to finish up our first video for shop organization. Let me know if any of those mistakes ring true to you. The entire point of these videos is for you to start thinking about how you have your shop organized and to actually slow down, take the time to think, is there a better way? I put a lot of thought into how and why I put things where I do, and I did my best to break it down as simple as possible. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to see the rest of the series, be sure to subscribe if you're not already. Hit the bell so you're notified when the next video comes out. In other news, I finally have a website. It still needs a lot of work, but for now it's going to have links to my videos. It has a simple blog over things that I've made or what's happened to me in the last 8 years. There's some merchandise available, and eventually I'll have plans on the site as well, hopefully in the next couple of months. I will post a link in the description below. The next video will be tool organization. It's already about halfway done, so hopefully in the next week or two I'll have it ready. Please let me know if there's any specifics you'd like to see in that, or if there's any questions you have about this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.